how does an entire society believe something that isn't true? It has to be something more than stupidity. As a psychologist, I probably shouldn't say this, but for a long time I thought that some people must just be dumb enough to fall for propaganda. But my job is literally to understand human behavior, and that explanation is not being good enough. Human stupidity is endless, sure, but it cannot fully explain a mechanism powerful enough to shape what an entire population believes. In this podcast, I want to explore what actually lies underneath propaganda and how whole nations can come to believe things that aren't true. Because lack of knowledge or low IQ isn't the real explanation, and I learned that the hard way. During my education and later in my clinical work, I met plenty of intelligent people. Educated, successful, genuinely sharp people, holding beliefs I could dismantle point by point in front of them. I remember one session in particular. A client, well-read, articulate, the kind of person you'd assume could not be fooled. I laid out the facts clearly, calmly, one by one. And the strange part wasn't that they disagreed with me. It's that the more evidence I gave them, the tighter they held on. By the end of the session, they believed it more than when we'd started. If intelligence protected people from false beliefs, the smartest people in any room should be the most accurate. That wasn't what I was seeing. So I started looking for what was actually happening underneath. One of the first answers came from a psychologist named Ziva Kunda. In her work on motivated reasoning, she argued that people often reach their conclusion first, and only then go searching for evidence to justify it. Most of this happens completely outside conscious awareness. You don't feel yourself doing it, it just feels like thinking. Then a researcher at Yale, Dan Kahan, found something even more unsettling. He tested whether higher scientific literacy helped people reason through politically charged issues. On neutral problems, it did, exactly like you'd expect. But on charged ones, the opposite happened. The smarter people were, the better they became at reasoning their way to whatever conclusion their group already held. Intelligence isn't a defense against this. A smart person isn't necessarily better at changing their mind. They're often just better at constructing arguments for why they don't have to. So, if it isn't stupidity being defended so fiercely, what is? The answer seems to be identity. When a belief becomes fused with your family, your tribe, your sense that the world makes sense, you stop evaluating it like a hypothesis. You start defending it like a home. A threat to that belief no longer feels like a disagreement. It feels personal. It feels like someone's trying to take something away from you. Now add one more mechanism, and this one is the quietest of all: repetition. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. The more often we hear a claim, the more likely we are to experience it as true. Not because we've examined it carefully, just because familiarity feels convincing. Your brain confuses, "I've heard this before," with, "This is correct." Now imagine controlling every classroom, every newspaper, every television channel, repeating the same story for years. Eventually, you're not just shaping what people believe, you're shaping what feels true to them before they've had a single chance to think about it. That was the moment my question changed. It stopped being, "Why are these people so irrational?" and became, "What would I believe if I had grown up inside that system?" That question sent me back to a novel I thought I already understood. 1984. There's a scene I keep coming back to. The 2 minutes hate. Citizens gather in front of a screen. The face of the enemy appears, and the room erupts in rage, screaming, disgust, all of it aimed at an image on a wall. And Winston, the one character we're supposed to see as resistant, the rebel, the secret diarist, finds himself screaming too. Not because he's forced to, because emotion spreads through a room like heat, and he was standing inside it. Most people think 1984 is a book about surveillance. Big Brother, telescreens, being watched every second of every day. I don't think that's the central idea. I think that scene is the real one, because what Orwell was actually writing about is something deeper than surveillance. The human need to belong. Think about who Winston is: intelligent, curious, rebellious. He keeps a secret diary. He questions the party at every turn. He risks everything for what he believes is true. And he still breaks. Not simply because of torture, although that's real, and it matters. He breaks because the party understands something about him that he barely understands about himself. That underneath the rebellion, there is a fear of being alone in what you believe. And that fear is louder than almost anything else in him. Psychology would later give this a name: emotional contagion. We absorb the feelings of the people around us without ever noticing it's happening. Orwell didn't invent that dynamic. He observed it. Now let me bring this somewhere real, somewhere that isn't fiction at all. On February 24th, 2022, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That same day, Russian state television described it as a special military operation, not an invasion, a liberation. Calling it a war, using that exact word, became dangerous enough to get you arrested. And here's the detail that stays with me more than any statistic. People in Russia stood in public squares, holding up blank pieces of paper. Nothing written on them, no slogan, no message, just blank paper. And they were detained anyway, because the state didn't need you to write something false. It needed you to not write something true. The blank page itself was the threat. Millions accepted the official version. Not everyone, but enough. I don't think that's evidence of mass stupidity. I think it's the same psychological mechanisms we just talked about, operating at the scale of an entire country. One dominant narrative, limited alternatives, real consequences for questioning it out loud. And when the cost of truth gets that high, the mind doesn't reach for stupidity. It reaches for survival. And it is remarkably good at disguising survival as conviction. Here's the part of 1984 that I think most readers miss completely. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The party doesn't actually want obedience. Obedience isn't enough for them. Forced compliance leaves resentment sitting underneath it, quietly, waiting. What the party wants is genuine belief. Because once people defend the story voluntarily, once they start repeating it themselves and policing each other for stepping out of line, the system doesn't have to work very hard anymore. It runs on its own. The citizens become the machine. And if these mechanisms are part of ordinary human psychology and not some unique defect found only in authoritarian states, then this conversation was never really about Russia or Orwell. It's about us. What beliefs are you holding because you've genuinely, carefully examined them? And what beliefs are you holding simply because questioning them out loud in front of the people you love would cost you too much? The research contains an uncomfortable irony here. These effects tend to be strongest exactly where certainty feels highest, where identity is most invested, where agreement around you is the most unanimous, which means the beliefs that feel the most obviously true to you right now may be the ones most worth examining. Orwell wasn't warning us about one government or one ideology or one country on the other side of the world. He was warning us about a part of ourselves, the part that would rather belong than stand alone. That's not a defect. It's a basic human need, as old as the species. Which is exactly why propaganda doesn't work by exploiting stupidity. It works by exploiting something far more universal, something sitting quietly in all of us, including you, listening to this right now. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you had been born inside that system, its language, its history, its incentives, its consequences, where do you think you'd be standing today? And are you certain, genuinely certain, that the answer is outside it? This is psychology behind stories. We use literature as a case study, not to review books, but to examine the human behavior that lives inside them. If this made you think, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, and see you next time.